Saintly labors of the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash were destroyed. Both this word priest there, and also the word initiate, about which I've already told you, were used and still continue to be used by your favorites down to the present time, in two quite different senses. In one sense, this word priest was since then and now still is commonly used, but only in certain places and for unimportant, separate groups of those professionals existing there whom everybody now calls their confessors or clergymen. And in the other sense, those beings were called, and still are called by this word priest, who by their pious existence and by the merits of their acts performed for the good of those around them, stand out so much from the rank and file of the ordinary three-brained beings there, that whenever these ordinary beings there have occasion to remember them, there arises and proceeds in their presences the process called gratitude. Already during the same period, while the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash was enlightening the reason of the brethren of the former brotherhood Chaptanturi, as well as of the newly collected 35 novices, there began to spread, among ordinary beings of the city Julfapal and its environs, the true idea that in the common presences of men beings all the data exist for the manifestation of the divine impulse conscience, but that this divine impulse does not take part in their general consciousness, and that it takes no part because, although their manifestations bring them certain what are called quite late repaying satisfactions and considerable material advantage, nevertheless they thereby gradually atrophy the data put into their presences by nature for evoking in other beings around them without distinction of brain system the objective impulse of divine love. This true information began to spread thanks chiefly to the superlative wise provision of the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash, which obliged everyone striving to become an all the rights possessing brother of the brotherhood Hichtvori to attain, as I've already told you, in addition to all kinds of definite self-merits, the ableness to know how to convince all the three separate spiritualized and associating parts of a further 100 three-brained beings there concerning the divine impulse conscience. When the organization of the first brotherhood Hichtvori in the city Julfapal had been more or less regulated, and was so established that the further work could already be continued independently, by means only of the directions issuing from the reason then present in the brotherhood, then the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash himself selected from among those who had become all the rights possessing brothers of the brotherhood, those who had already sensed the said divine impulse, consciously by their reason and unconsciously by the feelings in their subconsciousness, and who had full confidence that by certain self-efforts this divine being impulse might become and forever remain an inseparable part of their ordinary consciousness. And those who had sensed and become aware of this divine conscience, and who were called first-degree initiates, he set apart, and he began to enlighten their reason separately concerning these objective truths, which before that time were still quite unknown to the three-brained beings. It was just these outstanding first-degree initiated beings who were then called great initiates. Here it must be remarked that those principles of being of the initiated beings there, which were later on called their Ashiata's renewals, were then renewed by the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash. Well then, it was to those same great initiates who were first set apart that the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash now already the most very saintly, then, among other things, also elucidated in detail what this being impulse, objective conscience, is, and how factors arise for its manifestation in the presences of the three-brained beings. And concerning this, he once said as follows: "The factors for the being impulse conscience arise in the presences of the three-brained beings from the localization of the particles of the emanations of the sorrow of our omni-loving and long-suffering endless Creator." That is why the source of the manifestation of genuine conscience in three-centered beings is sometimes called the representative of the Creator. And this sorrow is formed in our all-maintaining common Father from the struggle constantly proceeding in the universe between joy and sorrow. And he then also further said, "In all three-brained beings of the whole of our universe without exception, among whom are also we men, owing to the data crystallized in our common presences for engendering in us the divine impulse of conscience, the whole of us and the whole of our essence are and must be already in our foundation only suffering. And they must be suffering because the completed actualizing of the manifestation of such a being impulse in us can proceed only from the constant struggle of two quite opposite what are called complexes of the functioning, of those two sources which are of quite opposite origin, namely between the process of the functioning of our planetary body itself and the parallel functionings arising progressively from the coating and perfecting of our higher being bodies within this planetary body of ours, which functionings in their totality actualize every kind of reason in the three-centered beings. In consequence of this, every three-centered being of our great universe, and also we men existing on the earth, must, owing to the presence in us also of the factors for engendering the divine impulse of objective conscience, always inevitably struggle with the arising and the proceeding within our common presences of two quite opposite functionings, giving results always sensed by us, either as desires or as non-desires. And so only he who consciously assists the process of this inner struggle and consciously assists the non-desires to predominate over the desires behaves just in accordance with the essence of our common Father Creator himself. Whereas he who with his consciousness assists the contrary only increases his sorrow. Owing to all I've just said, my boy, at that period, scarcely 3 years had passed when, on the one hand, all the ordinary beings of the town Julfapal and its environs, and also of many other countries of the continent Asia, not only already knew that this divine being impulse of genuine conscience was in them, and that it could take part in the functioning of their ordinary waking consciousness, and that in all the brotherhoods of the great prophet Ashiata Shiemash, all the initiates and priests elucidated and indicated how and what had to be done in order that such a divine impulse should take part in the functioning of the mentioned ordinary waking consciousness. But furthermore, nearly everybody even began to strive and to exert himself to become priests of the brotherhood Hichtvori, of which many brotherhoods were already founded during that period, and functioned almost independently in many other countries of the continent Asia. And these almost independent brotherhoods arose there in the following order. When the common work of the brotherhood, founded in the town Julfapal, was finally established, the very saintly Ashiata Shiemash began sending the said great